since then, I have been trying to enjoy a relaxed, retired life as far as possible. We have 2 children, one son and a daughter. My cardiac problem has a long history. It was in the year 1991 when a doctor in Singapore detected aortic regurgitation in my heart, which in medical terms they call it bronchiectasis. So that condition is an irreversible condition, and doctor was very concerned because to get the aortic valve replaced, I would require open heart surgery. But because of the lung disease, the entire respiratory system was too vulnerable, and it was too risky. So I was in a very bad mental shape, I did not know about the TAVI until that time, and doctor also didn't educate me on this aspect. So I was in tension, and my family was in tension, and the doctor consoled me that though you have aortic stenosis, it was still in the stage of mild to moderate level. So let us wait and see if the condition stabilizes so that you can go for open heart surgery. In 2014, I went to Singapore again for a second opinion, and my cardiologist, he also examined me clinically, got all tests done and all that. And then he told me that because of my lung disease, I should go for another option, which is TAVI. And he referred me to Dr. Chiam. So he explained to me that this aortic stenosis, though it was, till then it was in a moderate level, but it could at any time take a sharp downturn, see. But in March 2016, the test showed further deterioration. From the moderate level, it touched the severe level. So I decided to contact Dr. Chiam, and my family was also in serious kind of tension and what to do, whether I should go for this study, because the only reason why we were hesitant about TAVI because it was not known to many doctors. Even in Bangladesh, some specialists, cardiologists, didn't even hear about. Some of them, they said, yes, we heard about TAVI, but it is not being practiced here. So, this gave me a little kind of nervousness, anxiety, and tension.
TAVI stands actually for Transcatheter Aortic Valve Implantation, so TAVI. or in North America it's also known as TAVR, TAVR, or Transcatheter aortic valve replacement. So basically what we want to do is to replace the diseased aortic valve, and in most patients the commonest problem is that the valve has become severely narrowed from degeneration or wear and tear, which is why we see this condition mostly in older people. So the conventional way to replace the valve is through open heart surgery, but that means stopping the heart. We have to cut the chest bone and then open up the heart to replace the valve. Whereas TAVI is a method where we can do this minimally invasively from a small puncture hole in the groin without the need to cut open the chest and on a beating heart. So it is almost like a procedure where we do nowadays, very commonly, the heart angioplasty, where we balloon or put stents in the heart arteries, and it's something very similar to that. Basically, we are almost stenting the aortic valve, but the stent has a new valve already sewn inside. So I think to answer that question, we have to go back to the development or the evolution of TAVI. And when we first started this procedure in Singapore in February 2009, actually it was the first patient in Asia who's still alive, by the way. It was meant only for patients who were either inoperable for conventional open chest surgery or very high risk for surgery, because at that time the scientific data was limited. Subsequently, it was proven, or the FDA required scientific data to prove that it was at least equal to surgery in these patients, and in fact one of the studies showed that it was superior in terms of safety outcomes to surgery for patients at high risk. But patients at high risk or who cannot be operated form only a small proportion of all patients. And just last year in 2016, the second two big studies came out showing that this method, TAVI, is equal or still maybe superior to open surgery in patients who are at medium risk for surgery. So right now we can do with the majority of patients who have severe aortic valve narrowing. The only group that is still undergoing scientific study is those who are at low risk for conventional surgery. So we have answers for most patients. We still don't have the full answers for every single patient that we see who have aortic valve stenosis. Right now, relatively quick, from the time I perform it under local anesthesia and sedation, I don't even use general anesthesia anymore. From the time we give local anesthesia to the time we finish putting in the valve and then sort of putting a couple of sutures to close the artery in the groin, it takes about an hour. But basically, we introduce a tube, about 6 mm tube into the artery in the groin, and through this tube we put a wire that leads to the aortic valve inside the heart, and on this wire we deliver the valve, which is then sort of expanded within the previously diseased valve to take over the valve's function. So the old valve is basically pushed to the side in the patient's body, it is not removed, and inside the new valve is sitting and functioning to take over the function. Right now I think the success rate is very high. I think we are looking at about 97 to 98% success. And the risk of stroke in the current devices that we use now, we are on the 3rd generation device already. The risk of stroke will probably be not more than 1% or so. And actually in Singapore, we are the second country in the whole of Asia to use a new device where we can protect the brain during TAVI, and this has been shown in the FDA scientific studies to reduce the risk of stroke by at least 50%. The procedure, as I mentioned, takes about an hour. Usually they are in the high dependency for the first night after the procedure, and then subsequently the next day they'll be moved to the general ward, and from then on maybe another 2 or 3 days depending on how quick the patient recovers. So the entire hospital stay should be about maybe 3 or 4 nights at most.
So what happened? In May, when I was planning to go to Singapore again for a final checkup, give me some time. My children were also present at the time in Dhaka. He explained to me, he saw all the papers, all the tests, and he reconfirmed that I am a candidate for TAVI. and I should not delay it further. And he gave me a lot of encouragement. And my children, they also, without family support, nothing can really happen. And so my son, daughter, they also gave me a lot of support. My wife was a little hesitant because still we were not sure about this new procedure. We all went to see Dr. Paul Chiam. He explained. I asked him a few questions. First one, what are the risks and what are the casualty rates? So he answered to all my questions, explained how the procedure works and what is the prognosis. So I felt relieved. I felt relieved after the consultation with him. My family also, they thought I shouldn't delay it, I should go ahead. So in consultation with Dr. Paul Chiam, we finalized the date, middle of July. And finally the procedure was performed by Dr. Paul Chiam at Mount Elizabeth Novena, because the Novena has the hybrid OT, which is required for this. And after that I stayed in Singapore for about three weeks, a little more than 3 weeks, and had my final review done by Dr. Paul Chiam, and he found the aortic valve, the valve which was implanted in right position. So all my vital signs were fine, normal, and I flew back home. This initially, I want to make this point, that initially we were in the dark sort of thing. Because when the doctors here in Bangladesh, they also, even a doctor in the US, I spoke to him on the phone in late 2014 or early 2015. He told me categorically that in the US they had not yet started this procedure, or in that particular hospital, because it was not released by then, I think it was in 2014. And he preferred the traditional method, because that was, whether that was still in experimental stage or just a trial and error stage, So he did not encourage me to go for this study.
We have known Uncle Malik. Uncle Malik is all very dear to us. He's a very well-regarded diplomat. He was a former ambassador to Singapore and several other countries. He was also in UK in the Commonwealth Secretariat. He's a very widely read person. You always come to him to know about politics, to know about history. He has a great library. We live in the same neighborhood, and I must say that Auntie Mrs. Malik is very social. He's very affectionate towards us. And when he was faced with this health issue, and he discussed about different options that he was having to solve his current crisis. We were seeing also several doctors in Singapore, and they did not particularly recommend him the TAVI procedure, given his past medical condition, and they think they can carry on this way for even next few years, sometimes at his residence or outside area. What to go do about it? But I wasn't happy seeing him breathless. I was not happy seeing him worried, because I always find him a very pleasant gentleman, talking about so many positive aspects about life. But I didn't really, it felt me very sad when I saw him really down with a dilemma whether he should go for this surgery. He has his own stigma, fear, and given his age, whether this procedure would be appropriate for him. We explained to him what does TAVI mean, how the procedure is being done, required hospitalizations, and so we desensitized his anxiety and fear in different ways. We also introduced Dr. Chiam about his credentials, his skills. So then finally his family members, son lives in US, daughter is now here. All together we sat and we discussed that, I think we should go for a surgery for a better quality of life, and we should not let you continue your sufferings and to see what can be done best for him. So finally we convinced him, and his family, his son was also quite staunch, and auntie also gave her moral support, and later on he went for this TAVI procedure. Now he's back to a very happy life, plays with his grandchildren, takes a walk in the park, and we got back our Uncle Malik with this all, he has a lot of knowledge in his repository, and we are lucky to have Uncle back in her previous mood. Well, he gave us his previous reports, and we took down his past medical histories quite carefully, as we have to send over to the doctors for his understanding and to decide on the suitability of his procedure. So we sent over all the reports to Dr. Paul, and Dr. Paul reviewed it and replied back that this procedure is suitable for him and he can confidently perform it with lesser risk. And he spoke to Paul, he earned his confidence in Paul, and he knows about the services in Mount Elizabeth Hospital.
I have been repeatedly reassured by the Dhaka Liaison office. Then whenever I need any help, they are ready to do that. Whenever I need any appointment for consultation. Even recently I needed some medicine to replenish my stock, I had to depend. I contacted your director, Zahid. He arranged for my medicine supply. That happened very recently. So it's not only me. I think those who are availing of the services rendered by Dhaka office, I think all of them will confirm my observations. I know one or two persons, those who also visited the office. They think that one of the best decisions taken by Parkway Hospital Authority or management in Singapore was to open a liaison office in Dhaka. We think that was a wonderful decision, very wise decision. So, they also deserve our thanks, the authority in Dhaka. So we wish this liaison office will continue to render services to the patients.
Yes, so I remember somebody, at the time I was still at the National Heart Centre Singapore, and when he came, I only knew him as an ex-ambassador of Singapore, VIP. So we always, with VIPs, we're always a bit more careful. But in that case, when I saw him, I remember clearly that his aortic valve was already moderately to severely narrowed. Okay, so not quite the severe narrowing that we, by convention put a cutoff, but it was already quite near there. And in addition, there was also what we call regurgitation, which is leakiness of the valve. So when you combine the two, actually it makes it worse than if you just had one alone. And at that time he had some symptoms, but not a lot. And I told him it was time to actually start thinking about doing something with the valve. And for all patients, I always tell them that there are two options. One is open heart surgery, and the other one, which is TAVI or Transcatheter aortic valve implantation, a minimally invasive way where we can change the valve without cutting open the chest, and we do it on the beating heart. And based on his profile, because he has some other conditions including a lung problem, that makes him at higher risk for open heart surgery, and he would then become a very suitable candidate for this new technology where, or not new at that time because we've been doing it since 2009, that this technology will be very suitable for him to help him replace or help us replace his aortic valve. So actually after that meeting in 2014, so I think a month later, and I told him at the time that I was already going to leave and join Mount Elizabeth Hospital. And actually when I didn't hear from him for almost 2 years, I think, I actually thought that he either decided not to have it, or had open heart surgery, or had somebody else done the TAVI for him in some other place, or unfortunately for some patients they don't even survive that long. Because we do have patients who keep waiting, and then the next thing I know, they're sudden death. So I don't know which it was, but subsequently the Parkway office in Bangladesh, Mr. Sylhet told me he was wanting to see me when I was coming in May 2016. And at that meeting again, we went through what TAVI involves, what are the risks, how we do it, and how we choose the appropriate valve for the patient. And after that, I think everything just went quite quickly, and in July 2016, the procedure was done, which is a year and a half ago.
On an invitation of medical associations to give a talk here. So Uncle Malik also met Dr. Paul and got reassured that this procedure is not as serious as it seems to be, and he can easily go for it and get back to his life. So he did not have any options. The other option was the open procedure, which would have been more hazardous for him. And since Singapore, he has been a High Commissioner of Bangladesh to Singapore, and Singapore is a very familiar place for him.